Here are 10 traits that define an intelligent being. These are the traits that made it possible for us to create the very video you're watching right now. A string of letters forms a word. Words add up to make sentences. Sentences have meaning. Several sentences set the context. Have you ever thought about just how dynamic language really is, how it evolves alongside civilization itself? There were no such things as slay or cringe in the Middle Ages. The only association with the word guilty was probably a burn steak, not a pleasure you're ashamed of. And it would be centuries before low-key could ever appear on a printing press. Familiar concepts like the internet, career, and mortgage describe modern life and they're very recent inventions. But what if I told you there was a time when people didn't even have a word for the color blue? For example, me and night, in the language of the ancient Vikings, would both be described by a single word, blauer, meaning blue. In the saga of Sturlaug the Industrious Ingolfsson, these are the lines that describe a person with blue-colored skin. This blue man was tall as a giant, big as a bull and blue as hell. Now he bore Hrolfr to the ground, and the blue man wished to drag him down onto the club, but Hrolfr dug in his feet so firmly that they both tore away, and the blue man fell backwards onto his back, and beneath him lay a stone, and he broke his back upon it. As you know, blue men do not actually exist. The saga was actually talking about a person with dark, even black, skin, and in a modern translation those lines go something like this. Translate the word blauer today and the result is certain, blue. But 1,000 years ago the Vikings used blauer to describe the afterlife, a raven, and even coal. As you can see, there was basically no difference between black and blue. In fact, words for blue didn't even exist in most languages for a long time. The famous ancient Greek poet Homer, in his epic poems The Iliad and the Odyssey, never used the word blue. He described the sea as wine dark instead. So, does that mean people's eyes 1,000 years ago just couldn't tell colors apart? Not at all. The answer is actually more logical than you might think. The reason the word blue appeared so late in languages is that it had little use. Blue is quite rare in nature, and so were discussions about it. The sea and the sky are vast, sure, but to say whether it'll be rain or drought, words like dark or light were enough. Basically, for a long time, people just didn't need to separate blue from black. Everything seemed like a shade of one color. How often do you think the Vikings crossed paths with Africans 1,000 years ago? People's knowledge of the world was mostly limited to their own backyard. Vocabulary reflected our limited environment. Today's world is way more diverse, with new features, new technologies, new social patterns every year, and new words, so you and I can have a way to discuss them. Meanwhile, those in power also try to exert control over our language, ban some words, push others, steer us to speak a certain way. Here's the big question. Are they trying to narrow our thinking by limiting the words we can use to express ourselves? Are they trying to send us back 1,000 years, trapping us on a lonely island where we can't even tell black from blue? While you're thinking about that, don't forget to hit the like button on this video. Let's get started. Whenever politicians try to twist reality to make us believe in their version of truth, there's always a book that has a sales spike. Yep, you guessed it, 1984, a true modern classic made by British journalist and writer George Orwell. This book matters to us, not just because it's hugely popular, it's central to this video's theme. Orwell's novel made the idea that language can reshape how we think widely known. The book depicts a totalitarian world divided into several states locked in constant war. The main character is an ordinary clerk working for the government. At some point he realizes the ruling party isn't making life better and Big Brother is one hell of an asshole. Insulting him, even in your thoughts, is a crime punishable by death. We even have a special term for this kind of offense: thought crime. This word exists precisely because of Newspeak, a language we're going to talk about. If you've ever heard of Newspeak, know this: it originated right here in Orwell's book, and originally Newspeak was described by the author himself as "The 11th edition is the definitive edition," he said. "We're getting the language into its final shape, the shape it's going to have when nobody speaks anything else. When we're finished with it, people like you will have to learn it all over again. You think, I dare say, that our chief job is inventing new words, but not a bit of it. We're destroying words, scores of them, hundreds of them every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone. The 11th edition won't contain a single word that will become obsolete before the year 2050. It's all right here, a system that goes against the natural logic of language development when languages grow by adding new words and ideas. Newspeak cuts it down. It strips away our ability to even form ideas in our minds when there's no way to express them. The kind of ideas, for example, that question the party's decisions. Terms were made like goodthink, thoughts that fully support the party's ideology without question, and an opposite, a thought crime, means forbidden thoughts about the state. When your mind wanders, you must avoid crime-think and stick to goodthink. The think poll, or thought police, enforce this by hunting down anyone who dares to dissent. There are dozens of such words designed to crush free thought, individuality, and love, unless it's love for the party. Even consensual sex for pleasure is banned as sex crime. Instead, you're supposed to have good sex, no pleasure, only reproduction. This is your duty to the party. Orwell's important legacy is his attention to the substitution of concepts. Keep in mind, don't call war a war. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. He said Newspeak's ultimate goal was a language almost devoid of consciousness. In other words, speaking without an actual thought process, only repetition of slogans from the TV screen, radio, or posters. The individual disappears. Orwell's message is, the language we use shapes how we think. Digging up this info wasn't easy, just like everything else in this episode, and judging by the views, our channel's been running at a loss for a while now. But you can help keep it afloat by supporting us on Patreon. The link's in the description. Thank you. Okay, let's say Orwell's idea makes sense. Would that imply people who speak different languages think differently too? The real spark for this linguistic debate came from Benjamin Lee Whorf and his theory of linguistic relativity. In the process of studying the Hopi tribe's language, he noticed that they had no words for past, present, or future. In fact, this Native American tribe didn't even have a word for time, the way we understand it. Whorf concluded that these language differences might model how people interpret the world. This was back in 1956, and since then his work has been cited thousands of times. Of course, his work was criticized. Opponents argued that language differences don't drastically change how we think. The basic cognitive abilities are just built in. The discussion hasn't stopped even today, and there's plenty of modern research that causes debates. What if I asked you to arrange these photos in chronological order from start to finish? Let's be honest, you'd probably arrange those photos left to right. That is, unless you're a native speaker of Arabic or Hebrew, then it's actually right to left. But what if you asked the Aboriginal Cook Tayor from Australia, whose language doesn't even have left or right? If they face south, time flows European way like we'd expect, left to right. Facing north, they arrange photos right to left. Facing east, it's different again, like this. Time literally moves towards them. Their sense of time isn't tied to their body's orientation. Kind of makes us feel selfish, doesn't it? But to the cardinal directions, they adjust to the world, not the other way around. For them, time always flows east to west, no matter where a person stands. This discovery comes from cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky, who also made another interesting observation. Russian speakers seem to be much better at distinguishing shades of blue. A Russian speaker would use the word goluboy for this, but sinye for that, while we, English speakers, have it all just blue. Kinda like the ancient Vikings and Homer we talked about earlier. Okay, sure, in English we still can say light blue or dark blue, but we're still within the same colour and hue category. Let me show you the real difference between light blue and the mysterious goluboy. When Russian speakers were shown a gradual range from light to dark shades, the word they used to name the color would quickly change. Russian speakers have distinct words for these shades. The boundary between two different colors is quite clear. English speakers, on the other hand, showed a much fuzzier boundary. It's all blue to me. Each person's language is limited in its own way. It's shaped both by culture and nature and a completely normal thing. But when language is being restricted artificially, that's when alarm bells ring. At the end of the day, George Orwell didn't come up with his novel out of thin air. It was real-life events he witnessed that scared him. Let's travel back to the last century to the brutal Spanish Civil War, a savage clash between Republicans and Franco's forces that claimed about 500,000 lives. Our old British pal George fought on the Republican side as a member of the Workers' Party of Marxist Unity. Don't let the party's name fool you, George wasn't a communist. To an outsider, this war was deeply confusing. The Workers' Party opposed both Stalin and Hitler, which led its members into a coalition against the dictator Franco. Strangely enough, for a time, the USSR under Stalin even supported the Republican movement, but that's not what we're talking about today. What matters is that Orwell experienced firsthand the harsh realities of communism and fascism, far from the utopian pictures. The fact which these papers have so carefully obscured is that the Spanish government is far more afraid of the revolution than of the fascists. For some time past, a reign of terror, forcible suppression of political parties, a stifling censorship of the press, ceaseless espionage and mass imprisonment without trial has been in progress. When I left Barcelona in late June, the jails were bulging. But the point to notice is that the people who are in prison now are not fascists, but revolutionaries. They are there not because their opinions are too much to the right, but because they are too much to the left, and the people responsible for putting them there, the communists. The author didn't oppose any particular ideology. What he opposed was totalitarianism in principle of any kind. The other essay was his answer to the "Why do I write?" He was writing against totalitarianism, towards democratic socialism. Events in Spain made him realize something terrifying. The concept of truth was slipping out of the world, capitalist or otherwise. We were both thinking of totalitarianism in general, but more particularly of the Spanish Civil War. Early in life, I have noticed that no event is ever correctly reported in a newspaper, but in Spain, for the first time, I saw newspaper reports which did not bear any relation to the facts, not even the relationship which is implied in an ordinary lie. I saw great battles reported, where there had been no fighting, and complete silence where hundreds of men had been killed. I saw troops who had fought bravely denounced as cowards and traitors, and others who had never seen a shot fired hailed as the heroes of imaginary victories. And I saw newspapers in London retailing these lies and eager intellectuals building emotional superstructures over events that had never happened. I saw, in fact, history being written not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened according to various party lines. Remember, that's the same era when World War II was happening, and where better to practice reprogramming citizens' minds through language than in fascist Germany? Enter Victor Klemperer, a German Jew living through these times. His most famous work is The Language of the Third Reich, or LTI, an acronym from 3 Latin words in the original title. It speaks for itself. Klemperer studied Nazi ideology and how language was used to manipulate people. For example, defeats on the battlefield were called crises, but there were always either a world crisis or a crisis of Western European humanity, framed to distract attention from the German ones. And German defeats, crises, were always under control. Control through breakthrough, the kind where only a few German regiments broke out of encirclements that had cost entire divisions. In fact, control meant German troops didn't retreat at all. No, they deliberately pulled back from the enemy, letting them enter German territory on purpose. The language of the Third Reich was dynamic, much like Orwell's Newspeak, evolving alongside the shifting reality around it. The first years of war, the slogan was "Mit unseren Fahnen ist der Sieg," or "With our banners comes victory," implying that the Reich had already won. The deal is done. By December 1941, near Moscow, the Red Army begins to take the initiative. 19th of December, Führer tries to encourage his troops with the statement, "The armies in the East, after their imperishable and unprecedented victories over the most formidable enemy known to history, must now, as a result of the sudden onset of winter, transition from the fury of rapid advance to the steadfastness of a positional front. My soldiers, know this, my heart is wholly with you. My thoughts and my resolve are fixed solely upon the destruction of the enemy, upon bringing this war to a victorious end. The Lord God shall not deny triumph to his bravest soldiers." All right. First of all, blaming setbacks on the sudden arrival of winter in December, sure, I guess. And secondly, what happened was actually just a shift from offensive to positional warfare, not a withdrawal. The Battle of Moscow wasn't just a turning point in World War II. As our German philologist friend pointed out, it also turned the history of the Third Reich's language. From that moment, the slogan, "With our flags comes victory," changed to a new one, "Victory will be ours." Victory was no longer a done deal. It became a future goal to be earned. The cycle of hope was set in motion. For the Germans, moving forward turned into moving backward, but the media at the time couldn't admit they were retreating. In fact, propaganda had only recently insisted that positional warfare was a flawed, impractical move, a sign of weakness, even a sin. New realities meant new words, and so propaganda adapted a term, mobile defense, to describe the developments, trying to keep the spirit they had before. Klemperer writes about this with irony. Indeed, there could be absolutely no complaint about the movement of the German army in the final phase of the war. Yet no one openly admitted that this movement was anything other than ever more veiled upon layer of euphemism. The words defeat and retreat were never uttered, much less flight. Instead, withdrawal was used, a term less definitive. The army was not fleeing, it was merely distancing itself from the enemy. The enemy never broke through, it could only wedge in, at worst, wedge in deeply, after which it was intercepted or cut off, since our front line was supposedly flexible. From time to time, voluntarily, and to deny the enemy advantage, we carried out a front line reduction or its straightening. Orwell's world was never truly imaginary. It was built from the events he witnessed in the real one. Language manipulation never went away. Even today we have situations like in the US where some people tried to replace the word mother with birthing person.
Birthing people.
Birthing people.
Birthing people.
Birthing people.
We think our language needs to be more inclusive.
Or the whole controversy around J.K. Rowling. She was upset when the word woman was replaced with menstruating person. But if you're watching this from the US or Europe, understand this: no form of cancel culture comes close to what's happening in Russia. Cancellation is a part of state policy. Use the wrong words and you'll get legally labeled as a foreign agent with your rights restricted. You can be outright banned from earning money or even worse, end up in prison. Today, it's nearly impossible to run a Russian-language channel without self-censorship. Anyway, I hope this episode will help you notice and spot language manipulations that affect how you see the world. The works of Klempera, Worf, or Boroditsky show that language isn't just a communication tool, it forms human thought itself. Keep your thoughts clean, just in case. Here's some good news. After Hitler's defeat, as many former party members wanted to denounce and distance from their past, they worked on rolling back their own language conditioning. Today, I work daily with those who have been rehabilitated and those who seek rehabilitation. Despite all their differences, they share one trait. They claim to belong to a distinct group of victims of fascism. All of them were, to one degree or another, forcibly compelled, contrary to their convictions, to join the party they detested from the outset. They never believed in the Führer or in the Third Reich. Keep this in mind. If you support punishing people for using once normal words and don't notice when calling black blue becomes mandatory, be prepared for a future where only party-approved good sex is allowed. And remember, Big Brother is watching. You know who you should send this video to. For 6 years now we've been searching for our audience. Help us find it and accept our gratitude. Bye for now, and I'm the researcher.